The 1990s were a wild time in the NFL. You had neon uniforms, dome stadiums with AstroTurf that looked like carpet from a bowling alley, and somehow, the Cowboys were a dynasty. But nothing sums up the chaos of the 90s quite like the first overall picks. Some of them became Hall of Famers, some of them were Ryan Leaf before Ryan Leaf existed, and a few of them, you probably forgot they were even drafted first overall. So today we're going back in time, back to when the Panthers and Jaguars were brand new, the Browns disappeared for a few years, and quarterbacks were drafted just because they were tall. This is every first overall NFL draft pick from the 1990s, ranked from worst to best. Let's get into it. The worst first overall pick of the 90s goes to the Bengals, because of course it does. If you wanted to create a Frankenstein's monster of NFL draft failure, you'd start with Ki-Jana Carter. Not because he was a bad guy, not because he had off-the-field drama, not even because he couldn't play, but because his career was a case study in pure, unfiltered, soul-crushing bad luck. The Bengals were so high on Carter that they traded up to take him #1 overall in 1995. The first running back to go first overall since Bo Jackson. At Penn State, he looked like the second coming of literally anyone you want. Explosive, elusive, and built like a tank with a turbo button. In his junior season, he averaged 7.8 yards per carry, racked up over 1,500 yards and 23 touchdowns, and capped it off with an absolutely stupid performance in the Rose Bowl, 156 yards and 3 TDs on just 21 carries. He was so dominant that ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. basically promised he was going to be a 10-year Pro Bowler, and honestly, it looked like he might be right up until the moment he touched an NFL field. In his very first preseason game, not even a real game, Carter tore his ACL on his 3rd carry. That's right, 3 carries into his pro career, the Bengals' top pick, the sure thing generational back, shredded his knee. It was over before it even started. This was 1995 when ACL tears were a borderline career death sentence. He missed his entire rookie year, and when he came back, he wasn't the same. That burst, gone. That acceleration, gone. That cut on a dime quickness, gone. Over the next 6 seasons in Cincinnati, Ki-Jana started just 14 games, never cracked 500 rushing yards in a single season, and finished his Bengals career with just 1,144 rushing yards and 16 total touchdowns. Total. And it wasn't just the ACL. The guy had more injuries than a stunt double in a Michael Bay movie. Dislocated kneecaps, sprained ankles, torn ligaments, you name it, he heard it. By the time he left the Bengals, he was more of an insurance liability than offensive weapon. He bounced around with the Redskins and Saints after that, but never became more than a backup or goal line option. His final NFL stat line, 319 carries for 1,144 yards, averaging 3.6 yards per attempt with 20 total touchdowns in 10 seasons. The worst part? It's not like the 1995 draft was loaded, but the Bengals could have had Hall of Fame level defenders like Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, or Ty Law. Instead, they traded up and took a guy who gave them 0.7 yards per carry for his entire rookie contract. What makes Ki-Jana Carter the worst #1 pick of the 1990s isn't attitude like Jeff George or reckless mismanagement like Jamarcus Russell. It's the sheer scale of wasted potential, the massive investment for zero return, and the brutal irony of getting hurt before his career even started. You can't make this stuff up. If Jeff George was a soap opera, Ki-Jana Carter was a Greek tragedy. He was supposed to be the engine that finally made the Bengals a contender in the mid-90s. Instead, he became the cautionary tale that made teams stop drafting running backs at #1 overall, forever. The #2 spot belongs to Steve Emtman. If you're looking for a guy who had all the hype, none of the longevity, and still somehow gets overlooked when talking about draft busts, meet Steve Emtman, the 1992 first overall pick and the human embodiment of a wrecking ball with knees made of glass. Coming out of Washington, Emtman was an absolute monster. He won the Lombardi Award, was a consensus All-American, and finished 4th in Heisman voting. As a defensive lineman, which basically never happens, he led the Huskies to a share of the national title in 1991 with a 12-0 record, anchored one of the most dominant defenses in college football history, and looked like a surefire star in the pros. The Colts, fresh off a 1-15 disaster season, didn't overthink it. They took Emtman #1 overall and figured they just locked in the next Reggie White. What they got instead was a Greek tragedy in cleats. Emtman showed flashes as a rookie. He even had a 100-yard pick six against the Dolphins, which is insane for a 6'4", 280-pound lineman. But it didn't last. He tore his left ACL after just 9 games his rookie year. Then, in year 2, he tore his right patellar tendon, and in year 3, he tore his right ACL. 3 catastrophic leg injuries in 3 straight seasons. That's not a red flag, that's a crimson banner the size of a stadium. When he was on the field, you could still see it. He was violent, explosive, disruptive, but he just couldn't stay healthy long enough to build any kind of rhythm or consistency. After 3 injury-riddled seasons in Indy, where he played just 18 total games, the Colts cut ties and Emtman bounced around, spending time with the Dolphins and Redskins. He played 50 career games total, started just 19 of them, and finished with 134 tackles and 8 sacks. Think about that, 8 career sacks for the #1 overall pick who was supposed to anchor a franchise. For comparison, Dwight Freeney once had 16 sacks in a single season in that same building. But here's the thing, Emtman's failure wasn't about attitude, laziness, or even bad scouting. It was purely bad luck. His knees betrayed him before he ever got a chance to show what he could really do. He trained like a maniac, fought to come back every time, and teammates respected the hell out of him. But biology had other plans. Ultimately, Steve Emtman became a warning sign. Don't assume physical dominance in college automatically translates to NFL success. And maybe don't build your defense around a guy whose ligaments are made of crepe paper. He's not the worst pick of the decade because of ego or drama. He's this low because, through no fault of his own, he just couldn't stay on the field, which, for a #1 overall pick, is the one thing you have to be able to do. Next up is none other than Tim Couch. Tim Couch was never supposed to be the face of failure. Coming out of Kentucky, he was a golden boy. 6 feet 4 inches, cannon arm, quick release, and fresh off a ridiculous college season where he threw for 4,275 yards and 36 touchdowns. He lit up the SEC and Hal Mummy's air raid offense, and the newly reborn Cleveland Browns, desperate for a quarterback to build their franchise around, made him the first overall pick in the 1999 NFL Draft. And then they threw him directly into a wood chipper. Couch went to a Browns team that was an expansion franchise in name only. It was basically a shell of a team filled with rookies, backups, and spare parts from other rosters. The offensive line was held together with duct tape. The receivers couldn't separate. The run game was non-existent. And somehow the Browns said, yep, send Tim out there. He'll figure it out. He started 14 games as a rookie. He got sacked 56 times. That wasn't a red flag. That was a bat signal screaming, we are ruining this guy. Still, Couch battled through it. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. In 2002, he even led the Browns to a 9-7 record and a playoff berth. Their only one in the past 2 decades. But in classic Cleveland fashion, he got hurt just before the playoffs, and Kelly Holcomb stepped in and had a 400-yard game in a loss to the Steelers. From that moment on, the fan base was divided, the leash got shorter, and Couch's career never recovered. The raw numbers: in 5 seasons, he threw for 11,131 yards, 64 touchdowns, and 67 interceptions, with a 22-37 record as a starter. Not horrific, but not what you want from a #1 pick. And those sack numbers? Brutal. He was sacked 166 times in 62 games. That's a beating no young quarterback is walking away from clean. By 2004, he was out of the league entirely, physically broken and mentally spent. And here's the worst part. Couch was talented. Scouts still believe he could have had a solid NFL career if he had landed on a stable roster with a competent offensive line and some continuity. But instead, he got fed to the wolves. Every Browns QB since then, from Brady Quinn to Deshaun Kaiser to Baker Mayfield, owes Couch a beer because he paved the way for Cleveland QB misery before it was trendy. He's ranked this low not because he was a head case or a bust by nature. He's here because the Browns did what the Browns do best: take something promising and drive it straight into the ground. In another timeline, Tim Couch is a 10-year starter with Pro Bowls on his resume. In ours, he's the poster child for why drafting a quarterback without building the team first is a death sentence. Number 4 on this list, Dan Wilkinson. They called him Big Daddy, and for good reason. He was 6 feet 4 inches, 315 pounds, ran a 4.72 40, and looked like he was created in a lab to destroy offensive lines. Coming out of Ohio State, he was an absolute freak, the kind of defensive tackle who could both plug up the middle and chase down a quarterback. Scouts were foaming at the mouth, and the Bengals, in desperate need of a franchise cornerstone, made him the #1 overall pick in 1994. But instead of dominating the NFL, Big Daddy turned out to be a big shrug. Let's be clear, Dan Wilkinson wasn't bad. He had a long career, 13 seasons, and was a solid rotational player on some decent teams. But you don't draft solid with the first overall pick. You draft a game wrecker, a guy who lives in the backfield, wins Defensive Player of the Year awards, and anchors your defense for a decade. And Wilkinson, he never even made a Pro Bowl, not one, not even as an alternate. In his 4 seasons with the Bengals, he showed flashes. He put up 8 sacks in 1995, which is solid for a defensive tackle, and finished his time in Cincinnati with 16.5 sacks and 144 tackles. But he was never dominant, never consistent, and never close to justifying his draft position. Then came the contract drama. Wilkinson got into a bitter public feud with the Bengals over money. Shocking, right? A star player mad at Mike Brown. And eventually got traded to Washington in 1998 for just a 2nd and 5th round pick. Not exactly a king's ransom for a guy who was once supposed to be the next Warren Sapp. In Washington, Wilkinson was fine. He racked up 23 sacks over 5 years, played next to Dana Stubblefield on what looked like a scary defensive line on paper, but never made that leap to greatness. From there, he bounced to Detroit and then Miami, putting up a few more ho-hum seasons before retiring in 2006. His career numbers: 388 tackles, 54.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles in 195 games. Decent, respectable, but if you didn't know he was a #1 pick, you'd probably assume he was a solid 3rd round guy who carved out a long, durable NFL life. And that's the problem. The Bengals didn't just need a solid player in 1994. They needed a savior. They were a mess on and off the field, and they spent the top pick on a guy who turned out to be just okay. No Pro Bowls, no All-Pros, no real moments. He wasn't a bust like Ki-Jana Carter or Achilles Smith, but at least those guys flamed out in memorable fashion. Wilkinson, he was just forgettable. He's the kind of pick that doesn't completely ruin your team, but he also doesn't fix anything. He's like drafting drywall when your house is already on fire. Technically useful, but not what you need. That's why Dan Wilkinson ranks near the bottom of the 1990s first overall picks. Not because he embarrassed the team, but because he did exactly what you never want a #1 pick to do: disappear into the background. Coming in at the #5 spot is Jeff George. Jeff George is the kind of quarterback that makes you wonder if NFL scouts in 1990 were just drafting based on arm strength and vibes. Coming out of Illinois, he looked the part. 6 feet 4 inches, rocket arm, clean release. And he was an Indianapolis native, which probably made the Colts even more giddy to grab him first overall. But if you could win games on arm talent alone, Jeff George would be in Canton. Instead, he's at the bottom of this list for a reason. Let's start with the numbers. And they're not pretty. Over his 14-year NFL career, George started 100 games and went 46 and 78. He threw for 27,602 yards, 154 touchdowns, and 113 interceptions. Those numbers scream meh, but they don't tell the whole story. The real Jeff George experience was about how those games went. The back-breaking picks, the locker room blow-ups, the constant beefing with coaches, and the revolving door of teams that all thought they could fix him. Spoiler, they couldn't. His time in Indy was a mess from the jump. He held out before ever taking a snap, missing training camp in a dispute over his rookie contract. When he finally got on the field, he looked totally overwhelmed. In his 4 seasons with the Colts, he went 14 and 35 as a starter and never posted a winning season. In 1991, he led the league in interceptions and fumbles. Think about that. You're coughing the ball up more than once a game and still getting trotted out there like nothing's wrong. By 1993, the Colts had seen enough and traded George to Atlanta for a 1st round pick, a 3rd round pick, and a backup player. And the Falcons soon learned the same painful lesson. His 1995 season in Atlanta was statistically solid. 4,143 yards, 24 touchdowns, 11 picks. But even that got buried under the giant mushroom cloud of drama he brought with him. In 1996, it all blew up. Mid-game, Jeff George got into a screaming match with head coach June Jones on the sideline. Not behind closed doors, not after the game, on the sideline, on national TV. He was benched immediately and suspended without pay for insubordination. And honestly, that might have been the most leadership he showed all year. He then bounced to Oakland, where he briefly found success throwing bombs to Tim Brown and had arguably the best season of his career in 1997. 29 touchdowns to just 9 picks, 3,917 yards. But don't worry, it didn't last. He clashed with coaches again and got cut after 2 seasons. The cycle continued in Minnesota, where he replaced Randall Cunningham and posted another solid season, 8-2 as a starter. But once again, his attitude outweighed his talent. Then came Washington, and if you thought he'd mellowed out with age, nah. In 2001, George was benched after 2 games and promptly said he refused to learn the playbook because he didn't believe in it. Not couldn't learn it, refused to. That pretty much ended his career, except for the bizarre saga where he kept trying to get signed until like 2008, emailing teams and saying he was still in game shape. He even claimed he could help the Bears during their Super Bowl run in 2006. Spoiler, they did not call him. Jeff George's legacy is a strange one. He's the ultimate case study in why arm talent isn't everything. He could throw the ball 70 yards with ease, but he couldn't lead, wouldn't listen, and never figured out how to fit into a locker room without eventually detonating it. There were moments of brilliance, but they were always short-lived and overshadowed by ego, immaturity, and an allergy to accountability. In a decade full of bizarre draft choices, Jeff George still takes the crown as the one of the worst first overall pick of the 1990s. Not because he lacked physical tools, but because he never learned how to be anything more than a talented headache. Now we're on to players I wouldn't really call a bust, like Russell Maryland. Russell Maryland is one of those rare #1 overall picks who wasn't a bust, but still left fans scratching their heads. Not because he was bad, but because he was never great. He just kind of existed. In fact, when people list off #1 picks from the 90s, half of them forget he was even one of them. Coming out of the University of Miami, Maryland was a beast. He anchored the Hurricanes D-line, won the Lombardi Award, and was part of multiple national title runs. He was known for his work ethic, gap discipline, and intelligence. Not a flashy pass rusher, but a consistent high motor force in the trenches. So when the Cowboys traded up to take him #1 overall in 1991, it raised some eyebrows, especially since they were doing it with the pick they got from trading Herschel Walker, the trade that built their dynasty. With so many future Hall of Famers available in that draft, guys like Brett Favre, Aeneas Williams, and even Ricky Watters, they used the top pick on a nose tackle. That's like winning the lottery and immediately buying a dishwasher. Now, to Maryland's credit, he did his job. He was a starter on 3 Super Bowl winning teams, lined up next to Charles Haley, Leon Lett, and Tony Tolbert, and gave Jimmy Johnson exactly what he wanted: a smart, reliable interior lineman who clogged gaps and didn't make mistakes. But he was never the focal point, never a Pro Bowler in Dallas, and he only racked up 9.5 sacks in 5 seasons there. The Cowboys let him walk in 1996, and he spent the next 4 seasons in Oakland and Green Bay, still solid, still unspectacular. His career numbers: 375 tackles, 24.5 sacks, and 1 Pro Bowl in 10 seasons. That's great for a 3rd rounder. It's decent for a 1st rounder, but for the #1 overall pick, it's underwhelming, especially when you were picked ahead of multiple future Hall of Famers. What really knocks Maryland down the rankings is simple. He didn't move the needle. He was a passenger on a legendary Dallas team full of alphas: Aikman, Emmett, Irvin, Haley, but never the guy. And when you're the 1st overall pick, you're supposed to be the guy. Instead, Maryland was a role player. A very good one, sure, but still just a cog in the machine, and that's why he ranks so low on this list. Not because he failed, but because he never justified being taken 1st overall in a deep, talented draft class. You can't call him a bust, that would be unfair, but you can absolutely call him a reach, and a prime example of how even smart franchises can play it too safe at the top of the draft. In the end, Russell Maryland had a better career than most of the guys below him on this list, but as a #1 overall pick, he was just forgettable. Now for possibly the most unlucky player on this list, Drew Bledsoe. Drew Bledsoe was never a failure. In fact, he was one of the most talented quarterbacks of his generation, a true franchise centerpiece. But his entire legacy gets warped by one unavoidable fact: he got replaced by the greatest quarterback of all time. If Tom Brady never exists, we probably talk about Bledsoe a lot differently. We remember him as a strong-armed, tough-as-nails quarterback who resurrected a dying Patriots franchise, carried them to a Super Bowl, and built the bridge to legitimacy. Instead, he's remembered as the guy who lost his job and never got it back. When the Patriots drafted him #1 overall in 1993, they were a disaster, a 2-14 laughingstock trying to rebuild from the ground up. Bledsoe, fresh off a dominant college season at Washington State, was seen as the savior. He was big, poised, and had one of the best arms scouts had ever seen. He didn't disappoint. By his second year, he was leading the league in attempts and yards and pulling off comeback wins that reminded fans why they even liked football in the first place. In 1996, he brought New England to the Super Bowl. They lost to the Packers, but it didn't matter. Bledsoe was a star. The team was finally relevant. He made the Pro Bowl 3 times, signed the richest contract in NFL history at the time, 10 years, over $100 million, and looked like he was going to be a Patriot for life. Then came the hit. Week 2 of the 2001 season, Bledsoe took a brutal shot from Mo Lewis of the Jets. It wasn't just a concussion or a sprain. The hit sheared a blood vessel in his chest. It was life-threatening. He missed several games. The backup quarterback, a quiet 6th rounder named Tom Brady, and once Brady got in, he never came out. Bledsoe was eventually cleared to play, but Belichick made the call to stick with the hot hand. Brady took the Pats to the playoffs, and when he went down with an injury in the AFC Championship game, it was Bledsoe who stepped in and saved the season, throwing a touchdown pass and leading New England to the Super Bowl. But even after that, Brady got the start in the Super Bowl. The team won, and Drew Bledsoe was officially out in New England. After the season, he was traded to Buffalo, and for one brief, shining moment, he reminded people what he could do. He threw for over 4,300 yards in 2002, made another Pro Bowl, and looked like a guy who still had plenty left in the tank. But the Bills never built a winner around him. He was eventually let go, ended up in Dallas, and by 2006, he was out of the league for good. He retired with over 44,000 passing yards and 251 touchdowns. Rock solid numbers for a guy who had the misfortune of getting injured at the worst possible time in football history. Bledsoe didn't flame out. He didn't implode. He didn't get ruined by injuries like Couch or Carter. He was a legitimate top-tier quarterback who got passed up by someone generational. And yes, he'll always be remembered as the guy Brady replaced. But make no mistake, Drew Bledsoe was damn good. He gave the Patriots their first taste of respectability in decades, brought them to the doorstep of greatness, and handed off the keys just as the dynasty was about to begin. He wasn't a bust, he was just the wrong quarterback at the wrong time. Keyshawn Johnson was the kind of draft pick that made headlines before he ever played a snap. He was bold, flashy, loud, and most importantly, he could back it up. Coming out of USC, he was a dominant receiver with elite size, great hands, and a competitive fire that burned hot 24/7. The Jets fell in love with the swagger and the skill, and in 1996, they made him the first overall pick, just the 3rd wide receiver in NFL history to ever go number 1. He showed up to the league already talking, writing a book as a rookie called Just Give Me the Damn Ball. A bold move for a guy who hadn't even played an NFL game yet. But the thing is, he kind of earned it. In his rookie year, he posted 63 catches, 844 yards, and 8 touchdowns on a truly terrible Jets team that went 1-15. It was hard to tell if he was the solution or just yelling louder than the problems, but he made his presence felt. As the Jets improved under Bill Parcells, so did Keyshawn. In 1998, he helped lead New York to a 12-4 record and an appearance in the AFC Championship game. That season, he caught 83 balls for over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, numbers that finally matched the hype. He wasn't just a loudmouth, he was that dude in big moments. Physical at the line of scrimmage, clutch on 3rd down, and the kind of receiver who'd block your safety into the bench just because he could. But Keyshawn's relationship with the Jets soured quickly. He wanted more money, the team wanted less drama, so in 2000 they traded him to the Buccaneers for 2 first-round picks. And to be fair, that was a win-win, at least at first. In Tampa Bay, Johnson became the top target in a run-heavy, defensive-minded offense that didn't exactly highlight his talents. But he still put up numbers, 3 straight seasons of 70-plus catches, including a franchise record 106 receptions in 2001. Then came the Super Bowl run in 2002. Johnson didn't light up the stat sheet, but he was a crucial piece of the offense, especially as a blocker and possession guy. The Bucs won the title that year, and Keyshawn finally had the ring to go with the mouth. He'd gone from trash-talking rookie to Super Bowl champion, proof in his mind that he'd always been right. But again, the drama followed. In 2003, he clashed with head coach John Gruden so hard that the Bucs deactivated him mid-season and told him to stay home. The rare moment where a Super Bowl winning wideout gets kicked off the team while still in his prime. He finished his career with stints in Dallas and Carolina, putting up respectable numbers to the end. When he retired, he had 814 catches, 10,571 yards, and 64 touchdowns. A damn good career, especially for a guy who never played in a truly pass-happy offense. So why isn't he ranked higher? Because as a #1 overall pick, Keyshawn was never quite dominant enough to justify that spot. He was good, very good, even, but never elite. He never made a first-team All-Pro. He never had a season with double-digit touchdowns. He never finished top 5 in receiving yards. And for all the noise, he was always more of a chain mover than a game breaker. Keyshawn Johnson was a success. He made Pro Bowls, won a ring, and put together a career most guys would kill for. But being the top pick comes with different expectations. You're supposed to be a Hall of Famer, a legend, a name that defines a generation. And Keyshawn, for all the talent, all the talk, and all the moments, just never quite got there. Every now and then, a top pick comes along who's exactly who you thought they'd be. That was Orlando Pace. No debates, no drama, no overthinking. Just a 6'7", 325-pound wall of a human who made pancake blocks a household term and protected quarterbacks like his life depended on it. Coming out of Ohio State, Pace was the most dominant offensive lineman college football had seen in years. He was the first ever to be a 2-time Lombardi Award winner, a consensus All-American, and the anchor of a Buckeyes offense that routinely ran over anyone in their path. The Rams made him the #1 overall pick in 1997, and he immediately became the foundation of what would soon become one of the most electrifying offenses in NFL history. Pace stepped into the NFL and did what generational left tackles do. He started from day one and made life hell for pass rushers. He had the size, the balance, the technique, and the nastiness. From 1999 to 2001, during the height of the greatest show on turf era, Pace protected Kurt Warner's blindside and cleared lanes for Marshall Faulk, helping St. Louis reach 2 Super Bowls and win 1. He made 7 Pro Bowls, was named first-team All-Pro 3 times, and was widely considered the best left tackle in the league for the better part of a decade. But what makes Pace so rare is how quietly he went about it. He wasn't flashy, he didn't talk trash, he just dominated people. Week in and week out. You never heard his name on Sundays because the guy he was blocking never got close enough to the quarterback to make noise. He was the kind of lineman you could build an entire identity around, and the Rams did exactly that. His durability was also off the charts. Over a 13-year career, he played in 169 games, started 165 of them, and was a cornerstone on both elite teams and rebuilding ones. Even late in his career, when injuries began to creep in, Pace was still respected as a technician and a mentor. He finished his career with a brief stint in Chicago, but by then, his Hall of Fame resume was already secure. Orlando Pace isn't just one of the best #1 overall picks of the 1990s. He's one of the best picks, period. He was dominant, dependable, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that never needed the spotlight. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2016, and unlike most names on this list, there's no asterisk next to his legacy. No what if, no yeah, but just greatness. When the Colts had the first pick in the 1998 NFL Draft, the choice came down to 2 quarterbacks, Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning. Leaf had the bigger arm, the swagger, the raw athleticism. Manning had the polish, the pedigree, the football brain that never turned off. Colts GM Bill Polian and head coach Jim Mora chose the guy who prepared like a coach and spoke like a senator, and thank God they did, because that decision changed the entire trajectory of the franchise and honestly, the league itself. Peyton Manning stepped into the NFL and immediately became the face of professionalism. His rookie season was rough. He led the league with 28 interceptions, but even then, you could see the vision. He was reading defenses like a graduate student writing his thesis. He was calling protections, audibling out of bad plays, doing stuff veterans hadn't even mastered yet. And after that first-year turbulence, he never looked back. By year 2, he was throwing for over 4,000 yards and had the Colts in the playoffs. By year 3, he was an MVP MVP candidate. And then the real stretch began, a decade of dominance. Peyton Manning was a one-man offense. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterback in one, conducting symphonies at the line of scrimmage, changing plays with 20 seconds left like he was playing chess while everyone else was playing Jenga. From 2003 to 2010, he threw for nearly 34,000 yards and 257 touchdowns, winning 4 MVPs, a Super Bowl, and taking the Colts to the playoffs every single year. He redefined the quarterback position, not with athleticism, but with total command. He made guys like Austin Collie and Pierre Garçon look like Pro Bowlers. He turned the Colts into a 12-win factory, and even after neck surgery in 2011 cost him a full season and led to the Colts cutting him loose, Manning wasn't done. He went to Denver, picked up right where he left off, and won another MVP at age 37, throwing a record 55 touchdown passes in 2013. He ended his career with a second Super Bowl ring in 2015, riding off into the sunset like a quarterback version of John Wayne. Forehead gleaming, arm fading, but still smarter than everyone else on the field. The numbers are staggering. Manning retired with 71,940 passing yards, 539 touchdowns, 5 MVPs, 14 Pro Bowls, and 2 Super Bowl wins. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, the all-time face of the Colts franchise, and arguably the most cerebral quarterback to ever play the game. But more than stats or rings, what made Peyton Manning the best pick of the 1990s is how inevitably excellent he was. He met the moment, he met the hype. He wasn't just a generational talent, he was the generation. The Colts went from a forgettable team in Indiana to a national powerhouse because of him, and unlike so many top picks, there's no need to argue or justify his legacy. Peyton Manning is the blueprint, and in a decade full of busts, broken knees, and miscalculations, he stands tall, the gold standard for what the #1 pick should be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, be sure to press the like button and let me know in the comments section what you thought. If this video gets 1,000 likes, I will be doing another 1 ranking picks from every decade in one mega video. Have a great day.